and it'll be at flytweet.com/go. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us. Still see a few people joining, but we can get started here. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the virtual session that was intended to be in person, but obviously with the weather today it was better to do this virtually. We will do this again, the same meeting again in person, and we are still planning the date and place for that. But it'll likely be in East Haven and either late March or sometime in April. My name is Andrew King. I am the Vice President of External Affairs for Avports. I've been on this project for something like 5 years, and the project has come a long way. Today is February 25th, 2025. And I welcome everybody to this informal community meeting. In these processes, there are formal public hearings and public meetings, and this is one of the informal ones that we have done voluntarily to make sure that the community has an opportunity to get as much exposure to the project and have their voice heard as possible. That being said, we will have during the Q&A part of this, which will come later, those will be informal questions. They will not be part of the official record for the application. That comes at a later time, and we'll talk about that as well. There will be a Q&A at the end of this. This presentation will be a little bit lengthier than our usual presentation, but there will be a Q&A at the end of this. And as we have been doing with our public meetings or informal meetings, is setting up a process that the community agrees to and allowing you all to choose how long each person gets to speak and what happens if they want to go over their time. So we'll do that later after the presentation. As I mentioned, the presentation will be a little bit longer than usual, so bear with us as we get through it. There's sort of a lot of information. I think I am sensitive to the fact that there are people who have been on this project with us from the very beginning and very plugged in, and they know all the pieces, some of it better than I do. But there are also people who are very new to this part of the project, and they've heard about it in the news, but don't really know what's going on. So we're going to try to address the full gamut there and make sure that everybody gets a good overview of the project and what we're doing and what the deep application is. And that's a good setup for this meeting. Will be about the deep application. What is the deep application? What does it take to get through a deep application? What is DEEP's role? What is our what is the public's role in the deep application process? We'll get through that in due time. But checking my notes here. Yep. And so this will be very a high overview of the application process, not the application itself. We'll barely touch on some of the details. So if you're here today hoping to get into the weeds of the application, this won't be that meeting. We'll have another meeting or several meetings in the future, about 4 more meetings to dig into the details of this and let you all ask as many questions as you have. But that's not today. Today is an overview, and I appreciate all of your cooperation on that, participation, and it'll be important. We have a few guests here today. You saw Tom Cavalier Airport, and many of you know him. Either you have had conversations with him, or you've seen at the airport board meetings, or you see him helping cover stories in the news. And so Tom is doing a great job. When you have questions, you can always feel free to reach out to Tom. He's very good at getting back to folks. Our experts today, which I am not one of, is Eliza Hines from Connecticut Deep. And here she comes. There she is. There's Eliza. And then we have Kimberly Peace, who works for Hoyle Tanner and the airport, and she is the one managing the application process. And I'll just quickly let Eliza introduce herself and give us a little bit of context for what she does, and then Kimberly.
Good evening. So my name is Eliza Hines, and I'm a staff attorney from Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. I was asked to join this meeting as a guest to give insight on the permitting process at DEEP, and my goal tonight will be to explain the DEEP permitting process from DEEP's perspective. And I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Eliza. And then Kimberly.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Kimberly Peace, and I work for Hoyle Tanner. I'm the Senior Environmental Consultant with Hoyle Tanner. We are the design engineer and the permitting specialist for this project, and we are assisting Tweed and Avports in processing these applications and completing all the state and federal permits for the project.
Thank you, Kimberly. And somebody just texted me and said I said that it is the year 2025 and it is actually 2026. So I guess I'm still living in 2025. But that's that. I appreciate everybody joining, and it looks like we've had a few more join since we started the introductions there. And Deb will be running the slides for us. So next slide, please. We'll just get started. There we go. In the permitting process and the application, and then the public process, and that's when we'll get to the Q&A. Next slide. Okay, so this project has been around a while. We have not just arrived today at where we are. This started back in 2019 with the master plan that was done by the airport authority. And if you remember, Sean Scanlon was here back then, and he helped manage that process and help us to get to where we are today. And then in 2020, so that master plan, 2019, 2020, that master plan submitted to the FAA. The FAA, gives their approval of that master plan. And here today, plans for future growth and passengers and the market capacity, those sort of things. 2020, 2021 is when the city, the authority, Avports enter into a deal to inject some capital into the airport. At the same time, Avelo announced their arrival, a new airline. And to be honest, when we first started the project, there were not a lot of people who believed that the airport had value or that it could ever have value. And you can see, after 2021 or in 2021, when we started those routes in late November, that we did. There were a lot of people who have started flying out of it. We went from about 90,000 passengers a year to 1.4 million passengers a year in 2025. And again, we expect that in 2026. The part of that the next step from the master plan, and then after the deal between the city, the authority, and Avports, is to put together a project to manage the expected growth. And so that's what we did through the environmental assessment with the FAA. That is the NEPA process. That's a federal process that allows us to start the project. That's where all major projects and airport projects start, is at the federal level. And so we got through that process in December of 2023. We got our FONSI ROD. That's an acronym for Finding of No Significant Impact, and Record of Decision. And so through all of the data and the research that was done, the FAA said that that we could move forward in the process. The next process, of course, and then I should add too that in the master plan and in the development agreement and in the FAA process, I think in total up until this point we've had somewhere like 14 public meetings. So the public has been involved the entire way and in each stage of the process. And the Connecticut DEEP process will be no different. So we are now deep in the throes of the DEEP application, and we'll talk about what that means shortly. But that's where we are today. We're in the DEEP application review process and at 1.4 million passengers a year. Next slide, please. There we go. So with that success comes a lot of congestion at the terminal, and this is where the FAA gets concerned and involved. We have some temporary buildings that are set up that provide about 50% additional passenger space, and those, again, just temporary. I know all of you, almost certainly all of you, have seen the news reports, particularly Christmas 2024, when traffic was very unmanageable. And we learned a lot of lessons through that. And we're doing a lot better today. And we've been able to work with the city and with the authorities to do a lot better on traffic management. But there's still a lot of people that are coming through the airport. We added additional security gates. We now have 3 security gates, and then but the cost of that was that we no longer have any indoor. And you can go to the next slide. We have no longer have any indoor pre-security waiting space. It all happens outside. There you can see the lines outside waiting. And in the summer, it's not too bad, but on weeks like this week, it gets quite intense for passengers. And when there are delays, it gets even more intense as the terminal fills up and we can't let anybody else in. And we have to bring people through security by flight number rather than how you would normally go to an airport and just walk through security. Of course, the parking, you've almost certainly seen that in the news. So there are a lot of challenges with an airport that's who's has been undervalued for decades, and now the community is fully utilizing the value of that airport. Next slide, please. So the question when we go through the process is what happens if we do nothing? That was the fundamental question for the DEEP process. That's something of the fundamental question as we work through the state permitting and the local permitting is what happens if we do nothing? And the forecasts show that we will double our capacity from where, or double our traffic from where we are today. I think there's a lot we could unpack there. The airlines have this ability to grow at any rate, and it is somewhat unrestricted by the federal government. And so our job as terminal operators is to ask the questions: what happens if we do nothing? How do we be good stewards of both the airport and the community, and how do we manage this growth in a responsible way? And that's why we're deep in the middle of this project. There are things that will happen if we do nothing. The terminal will continue to overflow. We'll lose 50% of our terminal space. So we'll have even more people outside. It'll also, because there are less people that are able to be held in the terminal, then we'll have more people driving around the airport, and parking and traffic in the neighborhood becomes even more intense than it is on the worst of days today. And then, of course, as I was mentioning, there's the federal government protects the airlines and allows the airlines to grow at however fast their passengers will buy tickets. And so our job is to mitigate that responsibly. And you can go to the next slide, please. So we have a project that we have moved through the federal process, and we are now in the state process. And to just quickly go over what is proposed, there is an extended runway that's proposed that adds about 900 more feet, and that allows for those aircraft to carry even more people on the aircraft, which means fewer aircraft taking off. If you can put more people on the same kinds of aircraft. Also, the terminal building that exists today is a very old hangar that was retrofitted to be a terminal. It is in no way, shape, or form meant to be to handle the kind of traffic that it sees today. And you may have seen in the past, we have flood barriers that we've installed because when we have storm events, the terminal floods, and all those machines that TSA brings in have to be serviced, and the bottom floor gets quite full with water, particularly in the front. So that terminal needs to be replaced, and it needs to be moved away from the neighborhood and from the bottom of Fort Hale, and move the ramp, the parking space for the aircraft to the middle of the field, so less close to residents. So we have proposed a terminal on the east side and of the airport, and you see that little square box down at the bottom. That is about where the new terminal would go. And so we'll kind of get into that here in a little bit, but we propose to move to a more commercial side of the airport that's further away from residents and is closer to commercial streets with less driving through residential neighborhoods like Fort Hale and Wall Street and even Townsend. And of course, parking will be expanded to allow for less traffic on those roads because we have more people that we can fit into the parking lot. So that's the overview of the proposal. Next slide. And you can see just a few beautiful renderings of what it might look like. It'll be something close to this, but not exact. And those are online. Next slide. And so again, this is not something we just get to do on our own or get to decide on our own. There are several layers of independent review, and that's before we get to any local review. So we have the NEPA, which we've completed. We're right in the middle of the CT Deep, and we've got several permit applications filed there. Same thing, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We've got an application filed there as well that also had a public comment period from in December. So we have quite a few layers of review that we have to go through. We don't get to skip any of these. And to be very transparent about it, they're all very difficult and very expensive to move through. A lot of resources are put into moving through this to make sure that we are growing responsibly and moving the project forward responsibly. And with that, we are, as I mentioned, in the middle of the CTD process. And to explain the CTD process and the importance of it and why they exist, that's what Eliza's here for. So I'll invite Eliza to come back on camera and we can go to the next slide and allow Eliza. And Eliza, if you will just say next slide when you're ready, and Deb will move it forward for you.
Andrew, did you want to do these last few slides before mine? Or did you want me to present these?
Yeah, if you could talk through just what deep is there and what
Okay.
they do, and I can fill in as necessary.
Sure. So again, my name is Eliza Hines, and I'm a staff attorney at DEEP, and I'm here as a guest. Our main goal as an agency is to protect human health and the environment. We apply Connecticut's laws, which include statutes and regulations. And as my presentation and a few slides will go through, the public is part of our process. Let's see. Yep, DEEP was created in the 70s. We actually were ahead of the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. Connecticut's always been a good environmental place to live, but our job is to make sure that statutes and regulations are met. That's the beginning and end of what we need to do. We will respond to comments. We will consider them, and I'll explain that in a minute. So next slide.
As we move on, I think it is important, Eliza, to even though the authority is created by the state and runs the airport, that first box there, that DEEP is an independent agency and they're in no way tied to the airport. So that review is completely independent, and you'll talk about this, I know, in a minute, but bring your own set of experts to check our work and our math and to make sure that we are doing what we say, or that our math is good.
Absolutely. Our tweet is an applicant to the department just like any other applicant. There's absolutely no difference here. It's a very complicated application, but that just means that we review it even more carefully, or we put more effort into reviewing it because it's so complex. There are several, if we take human health and the environment and we say specifically for these permits, what are we looking at? We're looking at tidal wetlands, we're looking at inland wetlands, we're looking at water quality, including stormwater quality, stormwater runoff during construction and after construction. And then we are also looking at wildlife, fish, things like that, endangered species, protected species. And because these put constraints around what the airport can do. And my understanding is that they've already changed their design some in order to meet the requirements that they need to under law. Anything else to add there, Andrew?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's also important to know that it's not, it's not a done process, or the ending is not sure, that Deep can reject the application if we don't address these issues in a significant way.
That's true. All right, next slide. Okay, these are my slides. I'm more familiar with these. So my goal with my, I think, 5 slides here is to just walk you through the Deep permitting process from our perspective, from pre-application through final decision. So next slide. This is a long process with a lot of steps. So these slides are just going to keep moving to the left and to the left and to the left. You can see that there are 2 lanes so far on this slide, one for the applicant at the top and one for Deep. And these lanes will continue through the rest of my slides, and they'll be joined by other lanes, including the public, as the process goes on. Before an application is even submitted or prepared, there is an opportunity to have a pre-application meeting with Deep's Permit Concierge Office. And everything that I'm talking about tonight applies to all permit applicants, including the airport. There's nothing that we're doing for Tweed that we wouldn't do for anyone else. During pre-application meetings, Deep staff meet with potential permit applicants to discuss the project and which permit or permits may be required. We call these multimedia meetings, not like audiovisual, but like air, water, land. These are different media in our language. So we have people from all over the department come to help evaluate which permits might be required. So then we go back to the applicant. With that information, they prepare and submit their application. There are application forms, which can be found on our website. And then applications often require additional information like site plans, which I think you saw a little bit of before, narratives about proposed activities and proposed environmental protection measures. All of this information is given to Deep, and Deep does first reviews to make sure that it's complete, which is this review for sufficiency or sufficiency review. If there's missing information, Deep informs the applicant that more information is needed before we can even begin a technical review. Next slide. Okay, so we go back to the applicant's lane now. The applicant takes the notice of insufficiency and gathers whatever additional information is requested. And there's usually a deadline to do this. Once the application is complete and sufficient, Deep staff begin their technical review, which is where we are now. That's the little, you are here. This review is done by subject matter expert or experts and reviewed by supervisors and managers. For example, the team reviewing the Tweed water, just the water-related permit applications include 4 different environmental analysts, one of whose expertise is in what's called compensatory mitigation, which is what it sounds like. You're compensating for loss of wetlands. The entire team reviewing all Tweed-related permit applications or pre-applications includes wetlands experts, stormwater experts, plant and wildlife experts, and air experts. Technical review is the most intensive part of the process for Deep. As I mentioned earlier, our analysts must determine whether the permit application satisfies all of the statutory and regulatory requirements relevant to that permit. If the statutory and regulatory requirements have been met, then the Deep team drafts the permit. It's not just like a certificate, here, go and do. It's a complex document that lays out the specific parameters for the permitted activity, including any restrictions or conditions on the permit. With this in hand, the Deep team then prepares what's called a Notice of Tentative Determination, which we call NTD. And this does exactly what it sounds like. It's a tentative decision on the permit to issue or to deny. This decision does not become permanent until after a public comment and response period. Next slide. The NTD is published both on our website and in the local newspaper. And by the way, you can sign up on our website to get an email every time DEEP publishes any NTD. I recommend that you do that. It's a great way to stay informed on what's happening and when there are public comment periods. It links back to our website, and the NTDs published on our website have a link to the entire permit. And as an aside, those NTDs used to come down from our website after 60 or 90 days, and they don't anymore. We have changed their policy, so all of 2025 NTDs and going forward will live on our website for as long as we're around. The publication of the NTD begins the public comment period. So we've got another lane here, our public lane. The public comment period is generally at least 30 days. And during this time, DEEP wants to hear from you. Look through the permit, see if you have concerns. Let us know what they are. After the public comment period closes, we review all
Eliza,
of the comments. Yeah.
oh, sorry. But before you move on from that, I'm curious on other kinds of projects, and this one too. Like when Deep is looking for, getting comments from soliciting comments from the residents and the public, what kinds of comments are the most meaningful for Deep? In other words, the kinds of comments that really start to engage you all and force us all back to think about it a little bit harder.
Sure. So as I said, our job is to review the statutes and regulations and make sure that we meet them. And so that is our biggest red flag. If you look through the permit and say, I don't think this meets it, I think that you missed this here, that is the biggest thing. But that doesn't mean that's the only kind of comment that we want. We want to know, how is this going to affect you? I will say that remembering what DEEP does is really important. We have our statutes and our regulations that we administer, and that's it. And so if you're interested or you have concerns about something that's not what we regulate, that's not something that we can do about. But I would say err on the side of just telling us what your concerns are, and let us worry about whether or not it's something that we do.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So after the public comment period closes, we review all of the comments and we respond to them. We put together what's called a response to comments document. The first thing we do is we combine the comments into similar themes. There were several questions about blank, and then we respond to each comment. And we either explain how we changed the permit based on the comment, or if we did not change the permit, we explain why. And everyone who submits any comment gets this entire response document.
Does it happen often where comments are received, particularly on larger projects like this, where comments are received and then they do create a modification for the application or for the mitigation, or I'm curious how that works.
Yes. I would say this is very much not a formality, that there are many or most times where a public comment will lead to some sort of a additional condition on the permit or some sort of modification. We also get comments from the permit applicant themselves who look through the permit and say, this isn't exactly what we meant. And we can do that as well. So
Awesome.
there's
Okay.
another possibility here, which is kind of a choose your own adventure. So instead of moving to the left again, if you can go to the next slide, we're going to kind of go into an alternate reality, which adds a fourth lane, which is the DEEP Office of Adjudications. This is part of DEEP, but it is kept separate from the permitting programs and separate from the legal department. So if we go back in time to the public comment period, if during that public comment period a hearing is requested, now the process looks a little different. Instead of immediately working on a response to comments document, there's a hearing. either a public comment hearing or a formal administrative hearing. And either way, all of the participants, the applicant, DEEP, the public, and now the Office of Adjudications, take part in a hearing. During a formal administrative hearing, there is another public comment opportunity to give comments, this time to the hearing officer. After that, there's an evidentiary hearing. The applicant will give evidence of how they believe their permit meets all the statutory and regulatory requirements. DEEP staff will give evidence about their review process. Other expert witnesses can testify about the permit. It's a little bit like a mini trial. There's an opportunity to examine and cross-examine witnesses, and this is all for the hearing officer. The hearing officer takes all of that information, the permit application, the permit that was drafted, the public comments, the evidence, the testimony, and they again decide whether the permit meets all the regulatory and statutory requirements. And Andrew, yes, the permit often does change because of a hearing and a hearing officer. The hearing
One
officer
thing that
yeah.
I just say one thing I think is interesting. You said it's like a trial, and my job is to help understand for the whole team the entire process and what the public process will look like, what what a hearing could look like. And I asked whether or not I could talk to the official. I can't remember what's his name. That oversees the
hearing
hearing.
officer?
The hearing officer, and you all were like, nope, that guy's separate. And you don't get to sit down and
No.
meet him either.
No, that
So
is very much against the rules.
yeah. So I
Yep.
just, was curious about the process. I wanted to talk to him, and it was made clear to me that's like sitting down with a judge, and so it's like, okay, that's
Exactly.
we're not doing that, I suppose. But I just
No,
wanted folks to know that like it really is that kind of a serious hearing.
you're absolutely right. The hearing
Yeah.
officer, if I'm representing staff, I can't go and have a conversation with the hearing officer. They are kept separate.
Super
They have
interesting.
the authority to change the permit. They have an authority to add additional requirements, and they have the authority to deny a permit. The way they do this is they write what's called a proposed final decision. And so that's that column, or yes, column there. And the proposed final decision is then reviewed by the DEEP commissioner. And the DEEP commissioner is the one who makes the final decision, issuing or denying the permit. So that was a lot of words. It's a lot of time. It takes time for us to go through this process. I am going to be around to answer questions during the question and answer part of the presentation. I do need to say, because I'm a lawyer, that I represent DEEP and I cannot give legal advice to Tweed and I cannot give legal advice to members of the public. Also, I'm not an environmental analyst, and so I can't answer any questions about the contents of the permit. And then here's my last disclaimer. As Andrew mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the department is not taking down comments made this evening because this is not a state meeting. We do want to hear your comments. Just send them to DEEP later during the public comment period. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Eliza. I'm
Okay.
curious if you were to ballpark how many hours, is it possible to ballpark how many hours the DEEP will spend on a large application? Do you guys ever do those kind of calculations?
We are trying to figure out how long it takes us and to be faster. We want to be as fast as we can. So I can tell you that our goal to become faster is to do them within a year. And if you think that like I said, there are 5 different analysts that are working on this project. If they spend 5 to 10 hours a week for a year, each of them on this, it adds up very quickly.
Yeah. And then I see Alder Leland Moore has asked a question that you indicated there's a way for members of the public to track permits through the DEEP process. Would you be able to share
Yes.
a link to allow folks to track the Tweed permit?
Can I put that in the chat? Does that work for this?
We can try. You can put it in and Tom can figure out how to get it out to him.
Okay. All right. All right.
All right. Thanks for the question, Leland. All right. So thank you, Eliza, very much for joining us for that. There's quite a bit there, and really the meat of the meeting was in there. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we've now walked through the various permits that are required for this, and we've walked through the deep process and about what it will look like. That means then it is our turn to go through the deep application. We're going to give you an overview of the application, just very, very broad overview of the application. And so for that, I will turn it over to our application expert, Miss Kimberly Peace.
Thanks, Andrew. So we're just going to keep following on to what Eliza discussed. This is a little bit more formality to the applications and the processes. Again, this slideshow is going to be available later on the Tweed website, so you can take a look back at this so that you can see this information. There's going to be a little bit more technical side to it. So in a formal process, so there are two actual co-applicants for the project. It is the Tweed New Haven Airport Authority, which is an authority that is an establishment of the state and that operates the airport. And then there's also the New Haven LLC, which is the leasing organization that has come in with an agreement with the Tweed New Haven Airport Authority to essentially operate, run, and maintain the airport. So they are co-applicants on the project. We are actually submitted 3 applications that were submitted in April of 2025. That included a very long pre-application process. As Eliza said, we started meeting with DEEP staff as early as January in 2024, and we had multiple meetings with them throughout that time period. And eventually, we all agreed to an application that was submitted in April. There were 3 applications. So one is for tidal wetlands, and that has to do with the fact that there are no permanent tidal wetland impacts for the project, but because we are working within an area that was within tidal wetlands previously, we had to submit that as part of the paperwork process for the project. The inland wetland application is really the one that contains the wetland permits, the wetland impacts, and that will show the wetland impacts for the project. And then there is a water quality certification. This is in fulfillment of the EPA's Clean Water Act. That runs through EPA, but it is deferred to the state in some states, and Connecticut is one of those states. So through this process, a water quality certificate will also be issued. Those applications included an initial wetland mitigation plan that we have worked on in conjunction with DEEP, as well as one of our sub-consultants, eDesign. And we have presented what we complete a comprehensive wetland mitigation plan to offset the impacts that are proposed. We are continuing to work with DEEP on that. DEEP did respond back, requested for more information, and gave us some technical comments, an initial list of technical comments for us to address. That came out in August. We did review that. We discussed with DEEP. We submitted additional information in December, and we are continuing to meet with DEEP. So that technical review process, as Eliza said, is still currently right now ongoing. I'll go to the next slide. So what do we have to address in these applications? And this is really kind of the heart of the matter of what does DEEP regulate? What do they cover? And what do we have to take a look at, address, and answer? So the rules are here. So we have to address the Tidal Wetland Act, the Inland Wetland Act, and then the Clean Water Act, which is 401, which is sometimes you'll hear it called the 401 or Water Quality Certificate. So in this permitting process, we have to address all of those. And so before we get started, we have to address this and we have to receive a permit, not only from DEEP, and there's, we will discuss DEEP, but we will also get to the Army Corps, which is the federal wetland permit as well. So, but through the DEEP application processes, we have to look at wildlife, fish, and shellfish. So we did have to coordinate with the wildlife staff at Connecticut DEEP, as well as the fisheries staff. And we had to take a look at would those impacts result in habitat loss or listed species or state listed species that might need to be affected. We will also have to take a look at the flooding issues. I know there are a lot of you here that probably have some concerns about that, because this is such a low-lying area and there are some flooding conditions that happen. And it is DEEP's mandate, as well as our goal for the project, to not make any of those flooding problems worse, and that we need to prove through our application review and process that we are not going to have any change to the flooding conditions and that we would not be affecting those flood status relationships. So there would not be any damage, and that is part of DEEP's mandate and part of our response as well. So, and then question number 3, is there an alternative way that we could do this in which we could avoid, minimize those impacts to resources, which are wetlands, tidal wetlands, inland wetlands, as well as any effects to the Clean Water Act? So we did an extensive alternative analysis. As Andrew said, there was an FAA environmental assessment that was done that included a background and a lot of work on where can we locate the terminal? Why do we have to locate it here? What's the status of these wetlands? How functional are they? What functions do they prove in this wetland system? And really, we took a look at a lot of alternatives. And in that alternatives analysis, we have to answer the state's requirements for avoiding and minimizing to the extent practicable before we get to the mitigation. So there was analysis on that. It was completed, and it is part of our application and available to the public. So then when we take a look at number 4, so is the project still going to protect water quality, Long Island Sound? It is going to be designed to protect all of those resources through the impact analysis, the alternatives analysis, and then the mitigation process. So how much wetland is going to be disturbed? We're taking a look at the inland wetlands, and we're addressing the requirements, and then we've provided a mitigation plan that's going to offset those wetland impacts as part of the DEEP's requirements. And then stormwater runoff, no, there is going to be no pollution in terms of like you think of in terms of like historic pollution, but also maybe sedimentation. We think of that in a water quality sense. We have strict basic BMPs and stormwater controls for both pretreatment as well as runoff that have to be addressed, and those will be addressed and are proposed in the application. And so essentially, I think you're probably looking at that yellow box saying, what does this mean for you as if you're a neighbor to the airport? So if wetlands are damaged, stormwater has fewer places to go, there's an increased flooding risk. That is true, but also we have some wetland creation that's occurring, and then we have some wetland enhancement that's going to offset that potential damage. We're offsetting any potential impacts and preventing any potential impacts to water quality, ultimately to Long Island Sound that is to the south of the project. And then the mitigation plan is taking a look at how we mitigate for those impacts that we could not avoid. So let's go to the next slide. And as I said before, so we do have a federal wetland permit that is required. So this is section 404. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is involved through the project. The applicants, again, are the same, the Tweed New Haven Airport Authority, the new HVN LLC. Because this is a different permit process than the state permit, it has a different title, a different number. It is an individual wetland permit application. It was submitted in November of 2025. That Army Corps process, being different than the DEEP process, has an initial public notice and comment period. That there was a public notice that was issued, and if you were in a butter to the airport, you received a copy of that. There was public comment that was open for 30 days. It ended December 23rd of 2025. All of those comments have been received by the Army Corps and have been received by us as well, so that we are taking a look at them and helping the Army Corps in addressing those public comments. That public comment and the permit review with Army Corps is also ongoing. Let's take a look at the next one. Very similar to DEEP, what questions does the Army Corps application have to answer, and what do we have to address? This is the Clean Water Act Section 404, and more specifically 404B1 guidelines for public interest. So that pulls the public process into this application. And it's essentially no fill or dredge material can enter waters of the United States unless we receive an approval and a permit for it, and we have to avoid, minimize, and then mitigate. So is this the least damaging option available? We take a look at the alternatives analysis, and then why we have to propose the impacts, and then how that mitigation is compensatory for those impacts. So will the water's physical, chemical, and biological health survive? That's addressing those requirements of the Clean Water Act. We have to restore and maintain the biological integrity. Our goal is to not affect that because we have the impacts, again, offset by the mitigation. The wetlands, will they still do their job after construction? So wetlands do have important roles in our ecological biome, and they do protect us in a lot of ways. They're sort of the unsung ecological heroes out there. So what we're doing to the marsh that's surrounding the airport, and we'll take a look at that in the next couple slides, is enhancing those wetlands so that they have enhanced ability to do those functions, so that when we have impacts, we offset those impacts with improved functionality, both in the created wetland and in the enhanced wetland. So is this in the public interest for all of us? So the Army Corps does take a look at why does this project happen in this area with these impacts, and how that affects the region, how that growth, that economic driver that the airport is, can improve the economic health and stability of the region and the area. So that is a part of the balancing act when they take a look at the permit. Are there federally endangered species? We have to consult with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We don't have any habitat or any anticipated impacts to endangered species, no Section 7 takings or any federal species that is going to be harmed or injured in this process. Will unavoidable wetland damage be compensated? So when the permit is granted, there will be compensation for those unavoidable impacts. That's basically that compensatory mitigation that we're talking about. And again, so what does this mean for you as maybe an abutter or neighbor to this airport? Public interest means you had an opportunity to comment. It means that the Army Corps is taking those comments under consideration, and they're doing this permit review and process in order to understand and recognize those public interests. So once the airport, which already has a shortened runway and a terminal that's challenged, once that development starts to really become more sustainable for this location, you're going to see an economic driver that we hope is going to have an impact to all of the community. And then once the permits are issued, the wetland mitigation plan, as noted, locks us into place for restoration and creation and enhancement of those mitigation areas. So let's look at the next slide. I know some of you have said, where's the data? Where's the information? So here is a project map of all of the wetland resources that are within the airport boundary, and all of the wetlands that we have identified, what we call delineated. We've identified those boundaries. We've classified them for what we would technically call the Cowardin codes, which is through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and it's a way to identify what type of wetland it is. So as you can see, again, the north arrows to the right. So this is sort of it's a sideways view of the airport. We tend to do these things just because the airports tend to fit better sideways on these pages. But so it's a little shift for those of you who look at maps quite a bit. But essentially, when you take a look at this, we did a lot of extensive work to identify and map all of these resources so that we had a very clear and solid understanding of the resources as they exist today, and then how the project is going to maybe change and alter that, and then how that is going to be compensated. So let's take a look at the next slide. When we talk about the impacts for the project, the runway extension is not going to have a wetland impact, but we do have impacts from the terminal building. And as you can take a look at this, we have impacts to wetland 4, wetland 5, it's in that light purple hatching, and then wetland 6A. And then those are wetlands that are currently within mowed and maintained areas of the airport. Those wetlands are field wetlands where, because of the location in this watershed and because of the conditions of the soils, they tend to hold water, and water tends to sit there long enough to change the soils and grow the plants. Wetlands have those 3 characteristics. And so those wetlands are already being manipulated and altered. So those would be considered lower quality wetlands in the big scheme of how wetlands protect our area. There are edge impacts, if you can take a look at this sort of square along the edges, and then to the access road where we would cross on to, there's a really new access from Proto Drive to gain access to this new terminal. So we will have some additional impacts to those edge wetlands. And those are really what we take a look at in terms of functionality and those functions that we need to replace in the mitigation plan. Let's go to the next slide. So I think, Andrew, this might be a handoff back to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. That was very informational. Even though I've seen this information before, even as I'm watching you deliver it, I think, oh man, there's more here to learn about. So I appreciate you doing that. Yeah, so as we mentioned, I mean, we are, it is part of our commitment and our desire to make sure that the public is fully and thoroughly engaged. I mean, there's, one of the things that we truly believe is that a project is more successful when the community, number one, understands the project, and number two, and especially number two, when they have an opportunity to be part of the project and that they are consulted to make sure that it fits their needs. This is a public airport in a community, literally in a neighborhood, and so this airport is intended to serve that neighborhood and the community around the neighborhood. And so, it is really our intent and our aim to make sure that we are engaged with the public as often as possible and as thoroughly as possible. Um, we noticed we tend to give notice out all of the technical legal ways, which you'll see on there. That's all there. But we're also making sure that it's sign up for our newsletter on the website. Again, you can go to that flytweet.com/go and sign up there. There's also an alerts sign up, I believe, somewhere in there. But we're constantly, trying to communicate and spinning up conversations like this one. Next slide, then, please. Um, and so that means, we have done, or we will do rather, about 4 more public hearing, or sorry, public meetings like this one. And that will include the things that are, most important to you. Also, I really like this picture. Deb did a great job of using, I don't know who those two people are, but she did a good job of getting that photo in there. But the we'll do, review of all of the wetland stuff, whether, the flood mitigation plan, things that are important to the neighborhood. And we're flexible. If there's a topic that is really important to you all, then please let us know. And if we don't have something on the calendar for that, we'll put something on the calendar for that. And if we have to come back and do flood management twice, we'll do it twice. We really want to make sure that the residents have an opportunity to engage with this project and that it reflects the community that we all live and work in. Next slide. There we go. That's it. Okay, so we are going to get to the fun part of the show where it is Q&A time for you all. And man, this is like the most well-attended technical review that I've ever seen. So I appreciate everybody here. The way we've done in the past, and we're going to try to do it today, is to make sure that you all have a voice in how long people get. I think one of the when we've done public hearings or meetings going way back, the 3-minute time limit has always been a challenge for folks, and they feel like they want more time out of that. So we have come up with a system to help promote that, and that is that we vote on it. Typically in the past, I'll tell you what folks have voted on in the past, and because I can't just see all of you raise your hands and do this, I think Tom's going to try to put up a poll. But considering, how long each person gets, and I think we'll offer, I don't know, Tom, if you want to come on camera and talk to it, but, offer it's a certain number. I don't know. Tell me, we didn't get to talk about it much, but tell me what you have loaded there or your thoughts on.
So we could do 2 polls. We could do one which asks how long each commenter should get, and then another one after the end of each comment, whether that time limit should be extended an additional 2 minutes.
Yeah, okay. So let's do the first one really quickly, how long each commenter should get. 3 minutes doesn't seem to be enough. 4, 5, 10 minutes. What is your man, what's the word? What do you prefer? That's the word. So Tom, if you want to go ahead and quickly run that poll and we can answer it quickly and move on.
Let me do that. Let's see here.
It's so weird to not have everybody in the room. I really don't like it. I really dislike these virtual meetings.
So I just launched a poll, and the option provides 3, 4, and 5 minutes as the options for how long each speaker should have.
And if we get an overwhelming number in the Q&A of people asking for a different time, then we can run the poll again. And we'll just let that go for the next 30 seconds. Tom, are we getting feedback? I can't vote, so I can't see.
We are. So far we have 49% for 3 minutes, 32% for 4, and 19 for 5.
All right. I think
Looks like
49% does the
Yep.
trick.
Yeah, stabilize at 3 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So we'll do 3 minutes, and moving on from that question, the next question is, if you want to pop up the next question, we'll go from there. I don't remember how you framed it.
Let's see. So the next question will be, how long should each comment be extended? And we'll have the option of 1 minute or 2 minutes.
Oh, there it goes.
And
Just
just
popped
launched
up.
that poll.
And then to do this, what will happen is just for those who are new to this, we'll do a quicker up and down vote if somebody asks for more time because they've gotten to the end of their 3 minutes and they need more time. Then we'll ask you all to vote quickly up or down whether they should have this extended amount of time of 1 or 2 minutes.
And so of the 61 respondents, 62% say 1 minute for the question extensions.
Okay,
Or comment
great.
extensions, rather.
All right. And then you'll have the quick up or down poll now there. Oh, there it goes. Nice. Okay. And we have Eliza back. So let's go ahead and start with our Q&A portion of this. I don't know, Tom, do you want to explain how this is going to work? Because I'm not sure I entirely
So if you're
know.
interested in making a comment or asking a question, please raise your hand on your profile, and we will call you up just like this from the attendees list to join us as a presenter, where you'll have the opportunity to speak, ask a question, or comment for 3 minutes, at the end of which, if you want additional time, you can ask for it, and we'll share out another poll for that to the rest of the attendees.
All right. And while we're waiting for the first one to come on, there's some questions already in the Q&A, so I'll just work through those while we wait for the first person to come on. And Tom, you can just cut me off when you're ready. Mr. Scussel is asking, is there any difference in opinion which organization has more precedence, the Army Corps or CT Deep?
So I
You want me
can
to take that?
answer that
Oh,
a little
Liza.
bit. I can just say that applicants have to meet all of the requirements for all of the agencies. The requirements aren't in conflict with one another. And I always say, you know, it's a little bit like a pie. Deep is one piece of the pie. Sometimes you need a zoning approval. Sometimes you need a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, but they don't overlap. They're separate, and you have to meet all of them.
Thanks, Eliza.
I would
Right.
echo that
Go ahead.
and agree to that. That's we need a permit from the Army Corps and DEEP to proceed with the project. So if we only have one, we would not be able to construct. So we are working with both agencies and to collectively, so that if we say make a change for the Army Corps, we would let DEEP know about that change. And so we essentially need the permit from both agencies to complete the project.
All right. Thank you.
Great. And I will call up now Maureen Moore. So I'll, Maureen, promote you to a panelist. If you just unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes for your question. Hi, Maureen.
Hi, can you hear me? I thank you very much, Tom. Uh, in all of the discussions, I have not heard anyone uh, address the problem of Route 142, Shore Drive, and Short Beach Road. Short Beach is a historical community. Some of the homes are literally 4 feet from the road. Shore Drive, Short Beach Road. The amount of traffic, if one Googles to go to the Sandpiper, so uh, they take, if you're coming from the north, they take you off of 54, Google, and exit 54, and then take you directly across Shore Drive. And if you're coming from the south, they have you get off at the Short Beach exit, and then once again, the same route. The amount of traffic we are going to get with this new proposed, where the new terminal is proposed, is not only dangerous, the environmental impact we will have to endure is unfathomable. So I hope someone will address the Short Beach residents, and thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Maureen.
thank you. Yeah, so just addressing traffic, I think concerns. Eliza, how does DEEP address traffic concerns, or who addresses traffic concerns? This is
So
probably a
that
better
is something
question.
that is not in DEEP's remit. My understanding is that you are all working with the Department of Transportation to
That's
some extent
correct.
on that.
Yep. So the Department of Transportation has oversight over that, and the specifically OSTA or OSTA, depending on who you ask, OSTA. And there is a very lengthy process that we are in the middle of that that analyzes all of the traffic. We have done, I think, 4 traffic analysis so far, or 3 traffic analysis so far. We are starting another one, weather permitting, next week, adding additional intersections to that. I think we will. That some of that information will be forthcoming. I don't have any of that at my fingertips right now, but I appreciate the question, Maureen.
Right. Just give me 1 second while I figure out how to.
And then while we're doing that, I see somebody anonymous asked, "Are there no DEEP permits addressing the increase in air pollution that is being and will be caused by increased jet air traffic?"
All right, this one is also for me. So the short answer is that DEEP regulates what are called stationary sources of air pollution, not mobile sources of air pollution. And again, these are our fun terminology. Stationary sources being energy generating units, things like that. Mobile sources being cars and planes. It's just not in our jurisdiction.
Yeah, and so for that, it's my understanding here is that that is a federally regulated issue, generally speaking. And of course, we have to, if you go back and look at the EA, we have to address all of those questions in the environmental assessment, and so those are analyzed. And basically, what the EA says is that because we're extending the runway, that means we can have the same kind of aircraft take off from a longer runway with more people on it. And because we have more people on the aircraft, that means we can use less aircraft to go to the popular destinations, which cuts back on the amount of air traffic that we have. So we can use the larger 737-800s, which are still the narrow bodies, but they're bigger than, say, the RJs, which only fit 70 or 80 people on it. So when you can fit 180 people versus 80 people, you're saving a lot of capacity there. Currently, right now, and I know some of the feedback that we've gotten in the past is, well, you've got a Velo flying, these 37s, that 800s. And those are quite special in the industry. Most airlines don't operate that kind of an aircraft with that kind of a package. And even then, they still take these weight penalties and have to remove, have fewer people on the aircraft. So most airlines aren't going to run that kind of a package at most airports. And so the federal requirement here is that we are fitting for the industry generally. So that part is regulated through the federal government, and that was the answer that was found in the environmental assessment.
Andrew, if I'll just add a little bit more to that, you did a really great job at analyzing something that's super complicated, but I would direct if you want more information on that to go to the environmental assessment, which is still on the Tweed website. It is a complicated mix of plane size versus how much gas is used, how many people are on the plane, how heavy it is, balanced off with the runway. So it's actually a pretty complicated issue, but essentially, the FAA did look at the air quality changes from the proposed project, and especially based on the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. Those are NAAQs, if you're a little bit knowledgeable about that. Also looking at the attainment versus non-attainment for those air quality standards that have to be met, and if they're exceeded, then what would be some mitigative efforts. Then basically the proposed project and all of the fleet mix and all of the changes that Andrew just said were analyzed by the FAA and determined that we don't have changes and that we would not have changes to negative increases in air quality standards. So just wanted to add a little bit on that.
Yeah, thank you. So it's not, the EA is not technically a permit, but it is a process that we have to go through, and it is federally regulated through the environmental assessment or the NEPA process. Okay, thank you for that question.
And call up Lynn. Hi, Lynn. If you could just unmute yourself.
Yeah. Yes, you hear me? This is Lynn.
Perfectly.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you for coming on.
Yes. Thanks for your presentation. So I attended the U.S. Court of Appeals D.C. Circuit petition that the Save the Sound and the town of East Haven presented. I haven't heard of any result, but the things that they petitioned about were, number one, extending the runway will affect the wetland, and that kind of goes counter to what you said. And the other thing they petitioned was that bigger planes are not going to necessarily decrease air pollution. They're just going to allow more emplanements. And so I'm questioning what you're presenting, and I haven't heard whether the U.S. Court of Appeals has made their decision or not, but it was, presented, and I'm concerned that you're presenting information that may not be accurate unless you know that they've already ruled. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Lynn. And I'll address that as best as I can. So first of all, that is an argument that has been made by folks that are not at the FAA. The way an EA works is environmental assessment works is the airport does a lot of the work, and it's very similar. There's a lot of coordination with the FAA, and they have a lot of experts similar to the way CT Deep does. And that environmental assessment is submitted to the FAA, and the FAA reviews it, says this document meets all of the standards, that you did the right kind of analysis, and that your outcomes are consistent. And so then the FAA takes ownership of that document, and it becomes an official FAA document that then they are responsible for defending. So in the case, Lynn, that you just mentioned, the FAA is the lead respondent on that appeal, and they argue that the math is right. And so I am not smart enough to get into arguing the math on that between the experts, but I can tell you that's the FAA's position, and we after doing many hours of study and analysis, and I have not yet seen any other analysis presented that has that kind of federal oversight the way the airports does and the FAA's does. And so we are compelled to then stick with the FAA's document of the environmental assessment that analyzed it the way I have tried to articulate. But I can appreciate that that can cause some stress, and I appreciate the question, Lynn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay, calling up Lisa Brandis. Hi, Lisa.
Lisa.
You just unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfectly.
Lisa Brandis from New Haven, Connecticut. I am not a neighbor of the airport, but I'm a New Haven resident and user. I have questions about traffic following up on the first questioner, particularly about the impacts of traffic with emissions and particulates. And I understand that traffic is a moving thing, as you just explained, so it's not part of DEEP. But what about the 4,000 space parking lot or more that is planned, as I understand it? That is going to have groundwater runoff. It's going to have materials. The parking lot doesn't move, the cars on it move. But if you're going to have that many cars, where does that go? And so it's really a question, I think, also of are there environmental concerns and airport concerns and quality of life concerns? So maybe this gets more to you, Mr. King, than just the DEEP process, but more the FAA environmental assessment process for mitigating traffic. Literally, if we're going to have many more enplanements, maybe 2 million or more, that's many, many cars. You talked about the new terminal and the new parking. I didn't hear you say, and I've never heard anyone talk about how you're going to improve transit access so that there can be mobility to the airport without using individual personal cars. That's mass transit. And New Haven is getting electric bus rapid transit at about the same time. As the airport will be built, could this be a part of that plan to actually have regular transit? It goes back and forth to one of the largest train and transit hubs in the Northeast. That's our Union Station, which also is getting upgrades. We know that transit can reduce cars in neighborhoods. So I would imagine that a lot of these neighbors would like to have more transit options to get you to downtown, to a Union Station where you can take trains north, south, west, all over the country and all over the neighborhoods to get you to treat, so you don't need to drive a car. And I also would point out that the GAO in January 2026 just came out with a report, the Government Accountability Office, about accessible airports, and it ranked the best airports on accessible transit, how to get to those airports, and the best ones were linked either directly or by a short shuttle bus, like could happen at Tweed, to train stations. We have that opportunity, and I would love to see whether it's the transit department or the airport talk more about getting cars off the roads to now and for the next 25 years.
Yeah, really good questions, Lisa, and I really appreciate the observations there. So a couple of things, and any of my panelists who are much smarter than I am can chime in here. But first of all, getting cars off of 95 is important, and 95 is congested, and that is a state priority. The fewer cars we have on 95, the better. I think that's generally true. As far as who regulates that, the parking and all of that, again, that goes back to the federal regulations and how cars are regulated. Also, those questions are asked in the environmental assessment. And then as far as the multimodal, I think this is a super interesting question because New Haven has, a real opportunity to sort of become the first city in Connecticut that is truly multimodal in close proximity, the way the train station is to the airport, and the amount of access that you have through the train system, and then in the future the airport. And to your point about reducing individual cars, this is a conversation we've had many times with CT Transit. And as the airport increases in demand, and we're constantly having that conversation. But as the airport increases in demand, we are looking to increase service by CT Transit and other opportunities to work with the local municipalities who also have programs. So there are a lot of, I think there are definitely some opportunities in the future, and really love the electric idea. We ourselves at the airport are aiming to move to electric and hydrogen vehicles for airport use and for shuttle use at some point in the future. But all really interesting observations and questions there. And I'm sure I did not fully answer the whole question in the most compelling way possible, but that's what I have for tonight anyway.
Andrew, if I could just jump in, 2 points to make. The number of parking spaces in the application was listed incorrectly. We have, there was discussion of a parking garage at one point. The parking garage is no longer part of the project, and that did reduce the number of parking spaces on site. I was just trying to find the number offhand. I want to say it's somewhere in the 2,000, it's not 4,000. And your point is valid, Lisa, too, about the pavement that's required. That is all part of our stormwater analysis and water quality analysis. We are addressing that. There will be stormwater and water quality pre-treatment measures that will make sure that before the water and as well as the lengthened runway. So any new impervious on the airport has to be included in those analyses. And we will do what's called pre-treatment measures so that the water before it is discharged off of our site onto a wetland or a water body is clean. That's part of our BMPs, and it is part of our water quality certificate, and it's part of the deep application as well. We have to address those stormwater issues.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. And then while we move on to the next one, we have Mark Donovan's asked a question here. As a local student pilot, I'm very supportive of Tweed's expansion. Most local jurisdictions, East Haven and New Haven, also issue permits, approvals, i.e. building permits. Or is FAA, DEEP, and Army Corps of Engineers the only approval steps? I'm hopeful this can move to completion in the future. So yeah, like all other projects, has to also move through local approval processes. And that includes, there's a lot of overlay too, including in the OSTA process or the DOT process that requires local zoning approvals and from the local municipalities. So there's a lot of layers here to move through all of the permits that are required. So local permitting and approvals are definitely on our list, and definitely something we're working through.
Great. And just a reminder to everyone in the audience, if you wish to speak, just make sure to raise your hand on your profile. So far, we have 8 in the queue, and we'll do our best to keep working our way down the list. So up next, Debbie. Hi, Debbie. If you could just unmute yourself. Debbie, can you hear us?
Yep. Can you hear me?
There you go. Perfectly.
Okay. So my question is, who will be addressing the noise factor? I have contacted Thomas Cavalier back in May regarding one of those portable noise monitors. Never heard back from him regarding it. Sent him another message in December. I heard back from him on the 27th of January. Because where I live, I don't live near the airport, but I am in a flight path where they come over my house and my windows rattle.
So just a quick, because on 2 pieces there, one just more broadly on the noise program here at the airport. So there are really 2 pieces. One is our residential sound insulation program, which is to date allocated over $12 million to insulate nearby homes as part of what's called a Part 150 study that we do in conjunction with the FAA that identifies homes with the most meaningful noise exposure and then allocates federal funding to insulate those homes. So often known more casually as the window program or the door program. That's one program. The other piece is what we're doing on airport to create transparency around noise exposure and the noise generated from aircraft. And so we have deployed 2 portable noise monitors onto the airport property. And Debbie, you mentioned your application. So I have your application in queue. So what we're doing is we're working our way down a list of requesters from residential homes to take those portable noise monitors, which were previously on airport property, and put those out into the community to look at what those noise levels look like as you get further and further away from the airfield. One of those noise monitors is currently at a residential address towards the northwest corner of the runway. And so as we move into the spring and into the summer, we're going to continue to deploy those monitors, move them around to different property addresses, get a much more holistic view of noise exposure. And then, of course, we also have online what's called WebTrack. And so that's an interactive dashboard where every user can go in and look at aircraft, date, time, location, and see how far that aircraft was over an address or at a point in time or location, just again to create transparency around aircraft noise and activity. But just to acknowledge again your submission to that form as we continue to work our way down that list and anticipate we'll get that moving more thoroughly as we move into the warmer months.
Yeah, because it's my windows rattle, my house rattles. And I'm not anywhere near the airport.
Yeah, understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, DBW.
Oh, that's Dana Walker. Thank you. And I'm going to add on to Lynn's comment about the DC Court of Appeals hearing. There were two main arguments, and they aren't addressed here. And one of them was the FAA is very short-sighted. It only looks 5 years down the road for air and water pollution, and it does not consider climate change. But my question is the other argument that and I have read the EA from page 1 to the end, and there is no actual mitigation plan. The mitigation is all about we'll decide it later, we'll plan it later, and so there is no real mitigation plan. And in the past, Tweed has a history of not completing the mitigation that they promise. So I'd like to know from DEEP, do you actually have a concrete plan for mitigation? Do you require that? And how do you monitor that to ensure that Tweed actually does what it says?
So this is a little bit into sort of technical things that I don't know as much about. I can tell you that mitigation is, to my understanding, part of the permit application that we are still reviewing, that's still ongoing. As Kimberly had mentioned, there's also conversations with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and so there have been some, they require a small change, so that comes to us, and then we have to look at it again. So that's being looked at very carefully. I don't know the answer to some of your other questions, but I appreciate your comment.
Yep, and I can tell you, there's Kimberly. I can tell you that mitigation is a significant part of the application process. And Kimberly, I don't know if you want to speak to the kinds of things we think about and the kinds of things that DEEP are requiring of us, generally speaking, without getting into the weeds of it.
Yeah,
so
just to back up, so you are correct. In the environmental assessment, the FAA looks at a list of parameters, and they really have a different focus, and their intention is to identify that if there are wetland impacts, the wetland impacts will be mitigated for. That is a commitment that was made in the EA. And you're right, the discussion about how that mitigation would occur sort of ended with that discussion, the discussion of, yes, wetland mitigation will be required. The applicant is going to fulfill those obligations through the state permits. So that's why it's not in the EA, and that's where we are now. The application that was submitted to DEEP in April and the application that was submitted to the Army Corps in November includes a mitigation plan. There's two main components to that mitigation plan. We are creating a wetland. There is a parking lot that is on the west side, a little south of the terminal. That parking lot, the pavement is going to be removed. It is adjacent to an existing wetland. That existing wetland is going to be expanded so that there will be a created tidal wetland as partial fulfillment of the mitigation. The second part of the mitigation that is still under discussion with DEEP and Army Corps is an enhancement project, taking a look at the marsh that wraps around the southern end of the airport and really kind of halfway up both sides. As we showed on one of those images, there's a significant wetland system out there. Unfortunately, it's pretty degraded over time based in its position. There's a lot of Phragmites. I probably don't have to tell all of you that. The enhancement efforts that we're looking at include water level management, cutting and spraying the Phragmites, removing that Phragmites off site, and then looking at supplemental plantings to give that marsh a restoration effort. So hopefully it's going to rebound and become more of a native marsh. So there is definitely a mitigation plan that is out there. The technical details and the sort of dotting the I's and crossing the T's part on what part of that mitigation and the timing and the process, that is still in our technical review with DEEP and with Army Corps. But those permit applications are publicly available and they do include the mitigation plan.
Yeah, I would just add there that, this is all part of the application process, and everything that Kimberly's talking about is what we are proposing, and then DEEP has to approve those proposals. And so we work through the really technical side of that. So, even the stuff that Kimberly says today, as we move through the application process, those things, to be very frank, they could not, after we may not all agree on what the mitigation should be. And so then we have to figure that stuff out. But there's a lot that goes behind the scenes on understanding the impacts and the mitigation and where we end up at the end. But mitigation is, really I think the most fundamental part of the application outcome.
And Andrew, because we're still in that technical discussion, it wasn't a focus of the meeting tonight. There will be a future public information meeting that will have more of a focus on the wetland impacts and the wetland mitigation. So that is coming. But as Andrew said, we are still in a back and forth with DEEP and Army Corps about the final details of the mitigation plan. So, so that will be forthcoming.
Thank you, Dana. All right.
And
Marina,
there she is.
If you could just unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Lorena.
I'm Lorena and I live in East Haven, and I'm the only resident in East Haven who's done a Freedom of Information request to Connecticut DEEP. So Ms. Hines, thank you so much for being here tonight. I did receive from you via email the notice of insufficiency. I read the alternate analysis, and then I read the letter from Kimberly that was sent back. The letter that she sent back had a lot of copying and pasting. It didn't have that mitigation plan. It didn't have a budget. It did not have any of the responsible parties that you were looking for. And in that email, it said that that letter had been submitted late and it wasn't going to be accepted because it was accepted after the business day of when it was due. So I'm really troubled by the way that everything was presented tonight because I think the communication is not being transparent. As a public person, I cannot read the 3,000 page application on a phone because when you click it, your phone can't read it. So the airport has made it impossible for the average resident to go into the application to read it. You didn't show any of the pictures that you have in the application, which is a lot of those wetlands areas in the new parking lot are compromised areas. And when you take away those Phragmites, what you're doing to East Haven on Proto Drive is you're really taking out the natural barrier for flooding, which is the only barrier that we have. Recent Connecticut regulations changed where mitigation has to happen on the property itself. So I want to hear more from DEEP on how you're going to hold them accountable for that kind of mitigation that has to happen there. In terms of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer application, that's not posted on the Fly Tweed website. The public can't read it. We tried to get a public hearing, but that's pending right now, so we couldn't get that. We did have a lot of our residents submit comments, but we're not privy to read everybody else's comments. On the East Haven side, it's only 4.5 feet above sea level. Are you going to fill it? How high are you going to fill it? You didn't discuss that tonight. You also left out that in the Fonzie, it says that because the access roads such as Co Avenue, Short Beach Road, and Hemingway always flood, that your secondary access point is going to be through Thompson Avenue, which is a residential area. You didn't show that tonight in any of the pictures of the slides at all. That's in the
30
finding. You
seconds
didn't
left.
account for it. And also the greater New Haven water pollution has already proven that that part that you mentioned with the Phragmites, that has oily residue from New Haven Harbor from the 1970s. It's not easy just to pick that up and make it the green lush marsh that you think it is. It's over 60 years of dump area. And I don't know, I think Connecticut Deep needs to step up a little bit. You have the purple air monitors you can bring here. You already have all the
Lorena, that's
reports
time. I
on
could, if
de-icing.
you'd like an extension, I could also put out a request for an additional minute.
Yeah, I can go. That's fine. I want to hear from the representatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena.
I can answer some of your questions. I did want to mention the issue with the response date. Tweed had intended to present something to us, I think, by a Friday. They had asked for an extension to the Monday, and we were fine with that. So we did accept that. And I personally worked on your Freedom of Information request. So it's nice to meet you in person, sort of. But so we have permitting folks who right now are working very hard on the permitting. We also have enforcement folks who work on enforcing permits and also making sure people who should have gotten permits get them, which is not the situation here. So we do have a whole enforcement arm. And one thing that I always say is, I'm a lawyer, I look at things through a legal lens, is that, what the permit is what we can enforce. So when it comes time to do public comment, please put your public comments in, because eventually that will probably maybe turn into a permit, and that permit is what we will be able to enforce. So those are all the questions that I can answer this evening. A lot of them are a little bit more technical than I'm familiar with.
Yeah, I think on the deadline, it's a good point, because I was obviously part of those conversations, and well, obviously to our team, but this is one of those things where there are so many moving pieces within Deep that are folks making
Right,
judgment calls that
whatever.
aren't statutory or regulatory, and things like the deadline was
We
something
just
we had
copied and
offered up.
pasted. It was just copied and
And
pasted.
I'm sorry, Tom, if you could.
Yeah, Lorraine, if you want additional time, we can put out a poll.
I mean, you received the
So
document. Please
I'm
just
sorry.
copy.
We're just
You
gonna.
literally, Kimberly,
We're
just
gonna have to
copied
Lorena,
and
mute
pasted like
the.
3
You're gonna
sections.
have to push her
Yeah, it's just copied
to
and
mute. I'm sorry,
pasted.
Lorena. So the answer is we're not copy and pasted. I can assure you of that. But it's a conversation between Deep and the airport, and there's a lot of back and forth to understand each other and to make sure that we're on the same page and those kinds of things. I think it's expected that we would have those kinds of conversations and be able to get to the end point for all of us. The goal of it is to have a good application. So that's why Deep has been so involved in this and made so many people available to the process.
I'll also just add on to the Army Corps permit application is exactly the same as the Deep permit application. The only exception is the Army Corps Engineering Form 4345, I think is what it's called. It's a 2-page form, and it basically asks some more specific questions to their process, and then has all of the attachments that we would normally put in the Deep application. So they were the same document. And in the Army Corps public notice, that does refer to where you can find a publicly available copy of that application. I believe it refers back to the Tweed website. So the permit application is there. If there's some confusion that it's not the same application, maybe we need to relabel it a little bit differently. I would also say, it is a challenge to provide such technical information in a way that could be read on a very small screen, but the copies of the permit applications are also available in the town hall. And so there are opportunities for you to review the paper copy as well as download the digital versions, view the digital versions on a laptop. I understand they're very difficult to read on a phone because there's a lot of information that we have to address. And And it's, it's part of that process that we get into those technical details with the Deep staff and the Army Corps staff. So.
All right, thank you very
Thanks, Lorena.
much. And then we have this, if the runway extension is outside, this is from an anonymous attendee, is if the runway extension is outside the wetlands, can that part of the project be expedited? Short runway has raised safety concerns during inclement weather.
Part of it is the fact that the runway project is tied into the terminal project. As I said, they have a stormwater analysis for any new impervious or paved surface out there. So that includes the extensions of the runway and the terminal. And DEEP requires us to have those analyzed together because what they're called connected actions, and they are the same. They're same changes on a site. And so because of that, that stormwater analysis that is so important to everyone here who wants us to say and prove technically that there will be no increase in flooding and that no change in water quality, we have to address that for the runway and the terminal at the same time. We would love to be able to do the runway project first because we do understand it is as important as the terminal, but we have to do it in process with the permits for the terminal and the runway together.
Yeah, I'll also add there that, just I can very easily see from the outside world how a shorter runway might seem, particularly in inclement weather, that it becomes an additional safety concern. That said, the way the pilots and the airlines address these things is they do all kinds of math before they come in. They know the weight of their aircraft, they know the speed at which they're coming in, they know the conditions in the air, and they know the condition of the pavement. And they have a lot of calculations that have to be done in order to be able to land in inclement weather. And so that's why you don't see, it's not like driving a car where you're like, well, I hope this works and I hope I stop at the red light because I've hit it's not like that. It's really well regulated. And then of course the runway conditions are maintained by the airport, and the airport is responsible for making sure that the runway is in good condition for landing, even in inclement weather.
All right, I will call up Jules. Hi, Jules.
Hey, how you doing? Um, Good evening.
Good evening,
I
Jules.
guess well, I have a bunch of questions, but I'll try to limit it. I have heard one thing about that there's been discussion of access to the new terminal on the New Haven side as well as on the East Haven side, and I was wondering where that stands.
I'm sorry, Jules, I don't quite follow the question. If you could just rephrase it one time, please.
I have heard that there has been discussion to make access not only to the new terminal from East Haven, but also from New Haven. And I want to know where that stands right now.
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and it is an important question, and it is not something that we can answer at this time. It's not part of the application, and of course, we have all read in the papers what the requests are from East Haven, and of course, we are diligently working away to resolve those needs. And when I think we have an agreement on those kinds of things, the things that East Haven are asking for, then we'll be able to talk more about that. But at this point, the application is what the application is, and doesn't include some of the additional public conversations that have been had.
Okay, things that will happen in the future, but you're not including now. So I want to make one comment about the wetlands application. Is I noticed that the remediation would be entirely supervised by Tweed. And that's what I read in the Army Corps application. I don't think that's correct. And I also, I know, Eliza, you mentioned that there's enforcement, but in that application, I saw no repercussions for not fulfilling the remediation correctly or at all. So I'd like to know about that. And then I have just two more other things. I'd like to know if there are idling time limits. I mean, because you've got 4 lanes of cars idling. And is that actually legal to like idle for half an hour? Okay, that's it. I can keep going, but that's it.
Thanks,
Real
Jules.
fast, in terms of enforcement. So the penalties for not doing what's in your permit tend to be more statutory and regulatory. So the statutes and the regulations are the ones that say, is there a penalty? Could you lose your permit? Things like that. Those aren't really written into the permits or the permit applications themselves. So I would have to do a little more research to let you know exactly what that is. But in terms of process, enforcement is part of our process.
All right. Thanks, Jules. All right. Mark Donovan. How are you?
Can you hear me?
Hi,
Perfectly.
Mark.
Hi, I'm a student pilot at the airport, and over the last couple of years, I've learned that there's a lot of new technologies at airports around the country that can actually help mitigate environmental impact. So I'm just curious if the proposed new terminal will incorporate things like electric plane tugs or permeable pavement or renewable energy deployment. And I just think it's helpful for all of us as interested neighbors and residents to remember that the current old terminal isn't exactly an ideal scenario either. And the new terminal represents an opportunity to actually strengthen and address a lot of environmental concerns. So I'm just curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. There are a lot of opportunities to improve the environment or the way we impact the environment as we move forward. And I think even in the environmental assessment, we talk about electrified operations, and that includes, what are those things called? GPUs, ground powered units. That are electrified rather than running by diesel. The airport is generally taking a progressive approach on this, in that we are pursuing, electric vehicles for use around the airport, or hydrogen powered vehicles for use around the airport. We have a couple already, but we, been in that process for a while. Also pursuing lawn equipment, that can help us reduce the impact. I think there's a lot of opportunities there. It of course all comes down to, as it always does, it comes down to cost and feasibility for an operation as big as we are. And so we take a look at every opportunity to reduce our impact, because it's an airport, and every bit matters. But it really does come down to the opportunity, or rather the feasibility and the cost of it. And so we're looking at those things.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Then while you're pulling up the next person, you can go ahead and bring them in. Allison asks, you cite larger planes will reduce the number of flights and larger infrastructure will reduce traffic. What are these assumptions based on, and what enforcement mechanisms ensure those outcomes actually happen? Most of those things are found in the environmental assessment, or if I think actually all of those analysis are found in the environmental assessment, which you can find online, and the assumptions, including the exhibits, are attached to the environmental assessment. And if you are truly studious, you can move through those assumptions and those studies and see exactly how they got to where they are.
All right, and we have Matthew Benevento. What I'll also say here too is we have 4 raised hands for speakers, and we will do our best to continue to work our way down that list. If you do have a question, please make sure to raise your hand. I know we're past the 7:30 mark, so we'll do our best to move our way through the remaining questions. So if you do have one, please make sure to raise your hand, and we'll work through that list before we close out for the evening. All right, Matthew.
Yes, hi. I just have to reiterate with the noise and the soundproofing and the power washing of the homes. There's so much jet fuel. My mailbox is white. That was white is now black. My garage door that was white is now black. My sidewalks that were white are now black. Our roofs are black. This is everywhere. I mean, all you have to do is drive around the neighborhoods. I'm on the Burgess Street side, which will be butted up to the new terminal. And something has to be done for the residents. Something has to be done. You can't just tell me to go out and apply for a noise monitor. We have decibel meters on our phones, so we already know how loud they are. We're getting hit from all sides here. So your first graph showed 90,000 people up to 1.2 million. What do you think that takes? What gives on that? We give. The residents are giving on this. We're taking the brunt of this. We need help. So you have to, show us some respect. And the Breeze engines are significantly quieter than the Avello engines. So why is that? Why can't the Avello engines be made to be as quiet as the Breeze engines? But there's only 2 flights a day on the Breeze, maybe. So they're significantly quieter. I don't understand. And the Avello engines are way too loud. So reverse thrusters, whatever we're being told, and the 800s dwarf the Sky. And is Avport's going to bring in cargo jets now? When you do extend the runway, are you opening that up to more traffic? So it doesn't sound good to agree to extend the runway. I'm not for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Just to answer a few of those questions, because there are a bunch there. We have a few people left and little time left. But the first question I think I'll try to tackle very quickly is why why some aircraft are louder and larger than other aircraft, and that simply comes down to FAA regulation and federal regulation. The federal government regulates how much an engine can put off, how much pollution an engine can put off, and all kinds of regulations around that. But certainly one of the regulations is that airlines are free to, just like we're free to choose what car we drive, airlines are free to choose what aircraft that they use, as long as they meet the safety requirements that match, the airport and the runway, and it's a current engine. They're not buying engines from 1974.
Just quick, if I could add something to that too, for you, Matthew. So, just to underline the point, so aircraft, both the engines from an emission standpoint and from a noise standpoint, are all regulated at the point of manufacture. So as an airport, we have no regulatory oversight whatsoever on either of those. But what is encouraging, and one of the things that you pointed out, was that the Breeze engines are quieter, and it is because it's a newer aircraft. And as the newer aircraft are manufactured, we're seeing that those noise levels are decreasing, as well as the fuel efficiencies are increasing. And so that's an encouraging trend sign on aircraft manufacturing, which also leads into Avello, which currently flies the 737-800s. They will be transitioning to a new aircraft type, I believe in 2028. And those aircraft are smaller, and I expect that they are also quieter as well. And so the trend line is moving towards the direction I think that we would all welcome from a noise and emission standpoint.
Yep. And then one other thing just to address, because it does come up often, and I understand, even though the DEEP application doesn't address this and it falls outside of DEEP's regulatory authority, is the black soot that some folks experience around their house. And there has been some studies done, and there's even been a study done around the Tweed New Haven Airport by a Tufts professor that was not paid for by us, but was in fact paid for by a group that opposes the airport. And her study showed that a lot of these pollutants that people think are coming from aircraft are actually coming from things like UPS trucks or traffic on the freeway at the port. Not to say that airplanes, and diesel operations don't add things, but there's a significantly more amount of impact by those constant running of delivery trucks. I shouldn't say UPS, I'm gonna get sued by those guys, but delivery trucks in the neighborhood. And that's where a lot of that stuff comes from. And so, but we have offered, and I think we're the first airport in the country. I think this is true, the first airport in the country to offer a HEPA filter program for residents who live right in the neighborhood. And that was an outcome from that tough study that was provided by the group that opposes the airport. Is we offer residents who live within a certain distance, and you can find that on presumably, I guess, Tom, at flytweed/go.
HVNsound.com.
Oh,
We have
there you go. Even
information
better.
both on the residential sound insulation program, which is currently closed to new applications, but also our residential indoor air program, which is the air purifiers. And we are the only airport in the United States that has ever sponsored, funded, or managed a program like that. So we're proud of that, and certainly appreciative of the community members who engaged us on that effort.
Yep.
But thank you, Matthew. I will call up Gloria.
And I think we can load a few people just for time's sake. I think
Sure.
we can load a couple of people in here so that we can just
Great.
move
So
through
Gloria, I just called you up. I'll also call up Shirley McCarthy and Catherine Bennett. So we'll just go in order of Gloria, Shirley, and Catherine. And if in the meantime,
Gloria.
you could just mute yourself, Shirley and Catherine, we'll give Gloria the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep. Hi, Gloria. Can hear you.
So the EA was done, all your statistics and analysis was done off of the EA. Now that was prior to Breeze, correct? Because if it was, it's kind of your information that you have there.
Yeah, it was done prior to Breeze. That said, it did not study the Avello, did not entirely or just study the Avello business case. It studied the airline business case, generally speaking. So it's not limited to just a particular airline. That's not EA's require us, the FAA requires us to think outside of a particular airline.
Right, but I mean the statistics of cars coming in and all that other stuff, the noise. Of course, it'd be increased with Breeze coming in, whether who acknowledges it or not. Your map for the air filters, that map is how old?
For the air filters or the noise program?
The map for the noise program.
The map for the noise program, I think it was last updated in 2022.
That was also prior to Breeze, correct?
Correct.
Yep, that's correct.
So the EA, the map, you're not gonna spill the beans on the access from the New Haven side yet, and use Lot A as long-term parking with shuttle buses, which will cause more pollution. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I did not quite follow the question.
You're not going to speak on the New Haven entrance for the new airport?
Yeah, I think that we cannot speak to what East Haven is asking for at this point. That's something that they have to speak to, but
okay, so the EA,
and that's certainly not part of this application.
Okay, thanks. So just to recap, the EA is inaccurate because Breeze wasn't there. There weren't as many cars coming, not as many flights. Your map is outdated prior to Breeze, so it only has a certain amount of residential properties included with the sound, the noise, the air filters. So that's not included, and you can't comment on the access to New Haven. How about the idling of cars? The 4 lanes of traffic, isn't the minimum amount of time 10 minutes?
This is a really interesting question that keeps coming up, and I don't know the answer to it. I should, but at this point, I know we've talked about it.
Yeah. It is enforced by DEP. So who gets contacted when the cars
That's a good question for
idling?
Eliza. Who do we talk to at DEP?
Yep, you can talk to our air enforcement unit.
Air enforcement unit?
And is there a way, Eliza, that we can contact them, or that residents could contact them?
Sure, let me look up their information.
Okay, thank you.
And unfortunately, we're at time, but I did want to also say, Gloria, too, on both the, well, first on the sound insulation program too. While it was last studied in 2022. It's an ongoing program, so those studies will be updated. And so that's not the last and final, and especially because, we certainly acknowledge that the sound insulation program does not meaningfully capture everybody who has meaningful exposure to aircraft noise, but it does follow a very strict prescribed set of rules in how it's calculated. But again, not the last word on the sound insulation program, and so that will be updated in the future to capture more homes around the airport.
And just to clarify one real quickly is the EAs in the analysis they found that by 2032 we would be at essentially what is it, Tom? 2.4 million passengers or 1.2 outbound passengers a year. We are currently at half that. So we still haven't reached the full capacity of the airport of what the EA said we would reach. We're still 50% of the way there. So in that sense, it does account for any additional airlines or additional routes announced, additional passengers, and that is the purpose of the EAs, that we are going to exceed the capacity of this, the intended capacity of this terminal, and that we need to do something different to better manage it.
Yeah, because going from 3 gates to 8 gates is a huge lift. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Gloria.
6 gates, but yeah. Thank you, Gloria.
Shirley?
Oh, hi. My name's Dr. Shirley McCarthy, and I have a question for Eliza from Connecticut Deep. But before I go there with regard to the wildlife and wetlands, I just want to comment to Andrew regarding the air pollution study and Tufts feelings, the scientists, that it was trucks and stuff. In the EA, the air pollution monitors, some were far from the airport, like north of 95. A scientist colleague actually put monitors near the airport, correlated the gases that were emanating at takeoff, and showed they correlated with takeoff, and some were very hazardous. In any event, my question for Eliza, here's the background, Eliza. An Audubon expert who has birded at Tweed for many years reviewed the EA and noticed that there was a significant absence of data and information on the number of species that rely on the wetlands. They are simply not mentioned, and this included endangered species, species of special concern, and then the other thing that was concerning was the EA did not use the standard 5 essential sources for documentation of birds that would be impacted. So my question for you is methodology. I think I heard you at the beginning say that Connecticut Deep will use its own experts and methodology to determine if wildlife is impacted by losing the wetlands. You're not going to rely on the EA. Is that correct?
I can't answer that with a lot of confidence right now because that is not my area, but in general, that is correct, that we do our own analysis. Of course, there's a lot of overlapping information given, but yes, we do our own analysis.
Thank you.
Yep.
I can jump in there to help on that one. So in the process with the DEEP application, we have to reach out to what we call an NDDB, which is a natural diversity database search for our site to identify any listed species that are recorded for the state. Those include species of special concern. We did that. Once that list was generated and provided to us, we then followed up with coordination with the DEEP staff in terms of the wildlife staff, as well as the plant botanist. And we did surveys of the site. We took a look at the grassland birds and any potential listed species that was available or that was listed that we were required to address. One of the components, it's very exciting. We haven't had a chance to talk about it, and we will have a separate workshop about this or public informational meeting about this, is that there is, the airport is committed to purchasing a parcel of land that is going to provide over 25 acres of land conservation that is specific to grassland bird habitat. It is going to be enhanced specifically for grassland bird habitat, and it's going to be maintained through a long-term conservation easement that will provide grassland bird habitat to not only offset the habitat that is being lost for the project, but also in addition, that'll provide a healthy, sizable enough buffer that the state agencies and the federal, that the state wildlife specialist agreed on was sufficient to support that population. It's really exciting opportunity for the airport and for Tweed New Haven Airport Authority and for the new HVN, and we're excited to share that with the public. But we did have to review all of that state listed species and do the consultation with the state before we could even submit the permit applications. And all of that that coordination is documented in the permit application, which I realize is a really big document, but it is in there.
Okay, thank you all.
Thanks, Shirley. And one quick item too I wanted to mention just in regards to regional air quality. So there are approximately 4 air quality monitors both on and around the airport, all of which are publicly accessible on purpleair.com. And while we generally trend with the broader region as far as these air quality monitor readings, I do just want to point that out as a publicly available resource. And that's also linked on our website as well. So if you go to flytweed.com, under the community section, there's some additional information and resources when it comes to measuring and looking at air quality in and around the airport. All right, and we'll hand over to Catherine next. After Catherine, we have 3 more speakers requested. I will lock in these remaining 3 speakers. So after Catherine, I'll call those 3 up. After which we'll start to wrap up.
Good evening. I'd like to add a little on to what the last speaker said. I did read the environmental assessment, and as I recall, there were no list of endangered or species of special concern for insects, aquatic invertebrates, reptiles, or amphibians. Now, it's nice to care about the birds, but many birds, they rely on insects and other creatures like that to eat. So they're a really important part of the food chain and keeping our waters healthy. I'd also like to bring up something that never seems to be discussed, but it's an environmental concern. It's this de-icing fluid. I guess the government requires you to collect 60% of the de-icing fluid on a pad, and then it's just adjusted for pH. So they consider it not to be dangerous, but there have been studies that show it really does affect the water quality in the area. So what it does is similar to an algae bloom, where the glycol is being eaten by bacteria, which then take a lot of the oxygen out of the water, causing low oxygen conditions, which of course are bad for any kind of aquatic animals. There are other airports that have a much higher tech system that collects actually a lot more of it. If you're only collecting 60%, there's 40% going directly into the air and the water. They actually collect a lot more of the de-icing fluid and recycle it, reuse it. And I would like to see DEEP require some kind of a better system with this airport growing more and more airplanes. And we don't always have mild winters, as we know from today. The last thing is about the parking. So the initial plan had 4,000 spaces, parking spaces. And I assume you got that because you thought you would need them. So to just drop it down to 2,000, where are the other 2,000 going to park? Are they going to be just parking around the neighborhood? It's my understanding if you create
30 seconds.
A traffic problem and a parking problem, you have to address it and do something about it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine. And to answer that, just that last bit here, because we want to keep moving here, is, reducing the parking spaces that we have at the airport is something that we've thought about, reducing it down from the 4,000, something we're doing. And the way we will manage it is the same way, very similar to the way we're managing it right now, where we offer other options and alternatives to park, and then work closely with the municipality, whether it's New Haven or East Haven, to make sure that the streets stay clear from people who are parking. It's a bit easier to do on those bigger commercial roads than in the residential neighborhoods. So I hope that is somewhat helpful anyway.
Thanks, Catherine. All right. And I will call up Trina, Tony, and John. You're the last three with your hands raised to ask a question. So we'll just go in order of Trina, Tony, and John. And we'll start with you, Trina.
Good evening. I have a bunch of stuff. I'm going to try and do it quickly. First thing, a big concern is you're saying that if the runway is extended, that it will diminish the capacity of the amount of airplanes that we need. I don't know how that would be possible, because it is a business and you're going to want to increase the capacity and the amount of flights that we have. As far as the noise is concerned, I have had the noise or the sound mitigation, and it doesn't really work. You're still a prisoner in your own home because you can't go out because of the fumes. Updating the for the environmental impact. All right, they don't use ground power units now. I don't know if that would be something that's required in the future, but I would say that 90% of the planes here, particularly a Velo, use the APUs. The impact of the electric vehicles is going to be minimal compared to the exposure of the vehicle traffic that we have in the area, in the neighborhood. It's excessive, it's ridiculous, it's untenable. You can't even get up the street. And you're talking, all right, as far as the airplanes, we have to wait till 2028. We've already been subjected to all this for all this time. And, the passenger vehicle problems are not being addressed. As this meeting started at 6:15, traffic was backed up all the way up Fort Hale Road, on Burr Street, both ways, and into the airport. It's, you're talking about solutions that are years away, possibly. And I just don't know. And I'm quite tired of it. I'm tired of fighting it. I'm tired of living it. I'm tired of being exposed to all these fumes and the noise, starting as early as sometimes 4:30 in the morning. Your first flight is not until 6:30, but people arrive 2 hours prior. And they yell at each other, and we hear honking and all kinds of things. So this is really a horrible thing that you're doing to the neighborhood. And I don't know how it can be done in good conscience. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Trina.
Thanks, Trina. Tony Ann? Tony, can you hear us? While we wait for Tony, John, are you there? Can you hear us?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Oh, hi. Oh, all right. Well, we got you both now, but we'll start with Tony.
Hi. So if the new terminal is going to be on Proto Drive, I assume that the cars are going to go down Hemingway and Co. to get access to Proto Drive. So right now, both of those roads are surrounded by marsh, and when it's high tide, it floods, and it's impossible for cars to drive through. So what is the plan to mitigate the flooding in that area so people can get to their cars?
I'm sorry. The question is what are the plans to deal with the flooding so that people can get to their cars?
Correct.
Or flood
Yeah,
mitigation? Oh, yeah.
yeah. And that is a really good question that we will get into during the flood mitigation um, uh, uh, information session. It, the water management is part of the application process, and that's something that we can talk about more fully when we have fleshed out the rest of that mitigation plan.
So you're going to build a terminal with no way to get there. There's no plan yet. That doesn't make sense.
There, I mean, there is definitely a plan to get there, and I think that just like any other airport or any other structure, there will be days that things will be challenging and be difficult, and that is something that we have to contend with for sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony. Again, just to underline too and remind everyone, we will have more meetings, and that will be the opportunity for us to really provide a lot more information and drill down onto some of these technical questions and as it relates to the actual mitigation strategy for the project itself. But thank you, Tony and John.
Hi. I think the last few people definitely um, gave, especially Trina, gave you a feeling for the frustration that the neighbors have regarding the airport. The thing is that it's being sold as something that the neighbors have been involved with for the last so many years, the last 4 or 5 years. And I could say that the height of the airplanes, especially, is something that Tom, I talked to you about that once. You were going to get back to me with the reference point that the heights on your website are referred to, but mainly the airplane heights have been lowered. The acceptable glide path was lowered twice since Avilo started coming in. And this is there was nobody in the neighborhood actually approved this or even knew about it. And they might have been lowered even more times than I'm talking about. The last thing I found out about was that the threshold was moved to the north end of the runway, which further lowered the air, except the glide path that the airplanes come. So they're coming like very close to the rooftops. And this pumps more pollution into the neighborhood. Of course, it's louder. And now, as neighbors, we know the difference between jet fuel and something in the fume, the exhaust from a UPS cargo truck. We could tell that this is jet fuel. We know, and everybody knows. And I could tell when I go to Robert Drive, although that's not my neighborhood, that if the wind's out of the southwest, I don't know how those people deal with it. The thing that to understand is that, Tom, you said that you did something with the fume with the air purifiers that no other airport does. But airports that I see, houses are very far away from the airport. They're not right next to the airport. Yeah, you have houses all four sides of the airport, and really, these airplanes that put out all this fuel and fumes, they don't belong in the neighborhood. And I think that I mentioned this a couple times. And
I'm sorry, John, we're just coming up on time.
All right, that's fine. You could cut me off, but you need to understand that while you're working, and don't try to say that the neighborhood was involved, because we didn't approve these things. All right.
Just a couple quick points. One, and I know we've chatted about it in the past, and happy to continue the conversation, and I'll follow up after this too, just to make sure you have some of the resources that we're talking about when it comes to the online dashboard and our sound programs. But I'm not sure if it is true that the glide slope has changed. I will also be totally honest. I'm not an expert on that in any way whatsoever. But what I can say is that that is a heavily regulated, federally navigable airspace when it comes to aircraft at airports. It's a heavy regulated area. And that's also not something that we would have any insight or influence over in any case. But I'm also not entirely sure that that has changed. But certainly recognize, I know that you live at you're one of the very first houses at the north end of the runway. And so that can be challenging. And, we have the programs, some of which we've discussed today, to try and mitigate and manage that noise exposure and that emission exposure. But, ultimately, recognize that we are an airport, and that comes with some of these challenges that when we do talk about the new terminal and the expansion project itself does address many of these underlying issues when it comes to traffic, ground noise, and some of the other topics that were addressed. But appreciate your comments and look forward to continuing the conversation. I'll reach back out again after this.
Okay, Tom, I just want to let you know that if you go to your website, the Tweed website, Pilot Resources, it will tell you the glide path that exists now. It will tell you the glide path. If you go back a few years, it'll tell you the glide path that existed in 2021, and you can see the difference. And the last thing you should know, because you work for the airport, and everybody that works for the airport should know, because who contracted out the shifting of the pavement markings to the north, which is the last item that allows the threshold height. They moved the threshold. So they basically
John, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just because you are the last speaker, we're at the end here. These are a lot of very technical questions. I won't pretend that I'm the expert, but I will make sure that we connect to make sure we get the answers that you're looking for when it comes to this navigable airspace in the markings.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. We've gone a little bit long here. And, particularly for Kimberly, who has put so much work into this project and into this presentation, and to Deb on the back end of this, who put a lot of work into this. I really, really appreciate it. Liza, thank you so much for being here tonight and sitting with our neighbors and allowing us to ask questions and answer the questions to the best of our abilities. These are the kinds of things that we really want to continue to do, and we will continue to do, and we'll do some in person. And we appreciate all the questions. There are many questions that had nothing to do with the application, really, but they were curious about the airport and why they weren't included in the application and how those things are regulated. And so we'll always take time to try to answer those questions to help neighbors better understand. So I really appreciate those that engagement there. The last thing I'll say, I've seen it a few times, and I've been on the project long enough to know how rumors get started, is I did not address the cargo earlier, and so let me just address it right now. There are no facilities that are being planned or permitted to handle a cargo facility or cargo companies. So that is not something that's on the table. We can't regulate it away, but I can tell you that is not something that's on the table. There are no plans that address that, and we would have to go back for permitting just to be able to do something like that. And you all would, I'm very sure, hear a lot about it. I'd also add that I've done the back of napkin math, and there's not really a lot of room at the airport to add additional cargo facilities. We are space constrained. But we're sensitive to that, and that idea that I understand that cargo and that rumor has scared a lot of people, but that is not something that we are doing, and nor do we plan to do. So just address that. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you, Eliza, for joining and spending time all the way to 8:20 p.m. on a Wednesday night to do this, and Kimberly and Tom for putting all this together. Appreciate everybody. Thank you to all the residents who showed up. And if you have any questions, HVN community at apports.com is right there. And Tom is really good about getting back. That's not just an empty email inbox there. But anyway, thank you everybody for coming tonight. Have a
Take
good
care,
night.
everyone. Have a great
Thank
night.
you.